Can we start?
Yes, please.
Hello, and thank you all for being here today. This is the last B20-G20 Dialogue. And first of all, I would like to thank Minister Roberto Speranza and Indonesia's Health Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin for joining us once more today. I would also like to acknowledge the attention Minister Speranza has paid to the work of our task force throughout the last 9 months. This is made possible by the vision and leadership of Emma Marcegaglia, who in Confindustria is chairing the B20. As an Italian, I would like to say how proud I am to see our country congratulated for its global leadership in making the vaccination a requirement for work by figures as Anthony Fauci and Ursula von der Leyen. This makes me optimistic in the uptake of the B20 recommendations we will deliver to the G20 chair, Mario Draghi, on October 8 during the B20 summit. Our recommendations are the result of the collaborative effort of the top-level 97 members from all the G20 countries who are part of the B20 Health and Life Sciences Task Force, coordinated by 4 outstanding leaders. I have the privilege to count as co-chairs. Werner Baumann, CEO of Bayer, and thank you again for this meeting, Werner. Sir Mark Cofield, Chief Executive of Barts Life Sciences, who will close it. Jeff Martin, CEO at Medtronic. And last but not least, Leon Wang, Executive Vice President Asia and Pacific for AstraZeneca. Our work builds on a fundamental change we have all witnessed. Because of COVID, in less than 12 months, the life science community has developed a new generation of vaccines, drugs, clinical tests, and regulatory innovations, improving organizational and production processes. This is unprecedented and exceptional. As Health and Life Science Task Force in the B20, we are underscoring how health is wealth for all, and how the achievements of the life sciences sector no longer affect only the areas and the professionals directly involved, but are a strategic asset for all communities, both global and local, as well as the prerequisite of prosperity. I look forward to hearing all our speakers today as they will elaborate on the 3 main lines of action we are proposing to the G20. Firstly, we must accelerate the pace of innovation to build and consolidate a new normal in which our societies can prosper safely. We now have the opportunity to harness the converging worlds of genes, cells, and data, known as the Biorevolution, that represent a generational opportunity to use science and innovation for the greater good. Secondly, building on our first point, we need to assess and measure health as an investment and foster the transition to value-based healthcare models. Regulators and healthcare finance systems need to enhance their capabilities to work across the converging areas of technology. Finally, we need to build resilient and sustainable health systems, linking healthcare with environmental and industrial policies, while also addressing supply chain and manufacturing policy goals. The Pact of Rome proposed by Minister Speranza and unanimously approved by all G20 countries, is a significant step in this direction, and it aims to ensure that the population of the whole COVID world has access to COVID-19 vaccines, and to arrive before the end of the year to 40% of the population vaccinated is a great achievement. Thank you so much, and I immediately leave the floor to Minister Speranza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. I'm glad to address the B20-G20 Dialogue on Health and Life Sciences. I want to thank you for this invitation, and I also would like to thank you for your participation in the Health G20 Ministerial that took place in Rome on the 5th and 6th of September in the great framework of Musei Capitolini, and for contributing to the success of the meeting. The Health G20 Ministerial has been for all of us a fundamental challenge in order to turn the lesson learned from the pandemics into opportunities. In this regard, we adopt two crucial numerical targets. First, vaccinating 40% of the global population by the end of the year, and achieving the production of countermeasures, including vaccines, within 100 days from the outbreaks of a new crisis. The key message of the Pact of Rome was that the current crisis should be regarded as an opportunity which will allow us to build a better future for the whole world. It is important to work together and remain united in order to address the emergencies of the future, focusing on international and multi-sectoral partnership, scientific research and innovation, in the belief that no one should be left behind. The first session was dedicated to the impact of COVID-19 on the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. To respond to the pandemic, we must support the most fragile countries in order to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs, especially in terms of the universal right to health care. The second session addressed the issue of what should be done in order to prevent, be better prepared, and respond to future pandemics, starting from how to reach better coordination at international level, with the WHO continuing to play a central role. In this context, the One Health approach, dealing with human, animal, and environment health, is essential. The third session examined the tools which are allowing us to effectively counter the pandemic. It is important to identify the best possible global strategies to support development and equitable access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. We need to accelerate the distribution of vaccines. Italy donated so far more than 6 million doses through COVAX and bilateral agreements, and is committed to donate a total of 15 million doses by the end of the year. In this regard, scientific research, international cooperation, and public-private partnership were able to produce extraordinary results, including safe and effective vaccines in a matter of months. It will be necessary to continue to work to develop innovative products, encouraging production at regional and local level, promoting efficient supply chains, and the voluntary transfer of technology. The health ministers' meetings has gathered in the Pact of Rome the principle which will inspire the fight against COVID-19. Now we will meet again with the finance minister at the end of October, before the Leaders' Summit, to face the fundamental issue of how to reinforce the global health architecture. The goal is to improve cooperation among existing international organizations and national authorities, possibly establishing a joint G20 health and finance ministers coordination and decision-making forum. We also need to increase funding for global and national health systems in order to overcome decades of underinvestments. I'm sure that even from your debate can arrive good ideas to make stronger the work we are all doing together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio, and thank you, Minister Speranza, for your excellent interventions and very encouraging news and very ambitious targets set by G20 as part of the Pact of Rome, vaccinating 40% of the world's population by year-end, and within 100 days developing the tools. I think you've set you've provided a wonderful framing for the rest of the deliberations for this B20-G20 meeting. We next have our co-chairs from the B20 partnership, namely Chief Executive of Bayer, Mr. Werner Baumann, then Chairman and Chief Executive of Medtronic, Mr. Jeff Martha, and Executive Vice President of AstraZeneca, Leon Wang. They each have an intervention before I hand the floor to OECD. So, Mr. Baumann, over to you.
Oh, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Before I come to the few points that I wanted to highlight, Minister Speranza, I'd like to congratulate you and your government for a very, very strong stance that you have taken in making vaccination mandatory. I find it a great example of a country in Europe that takes the bait and that leads. So my heartfelt congratulations. I find this really fantastic. So you touched on a few things, one of them being innovation and the other one, of course, more cooperation and more funding. And I think all of that aligns very, very well and resonates with us. What I want to do briefly is to talk a little bit about the first point, and that is innovation and how crucially important stronger focus on innovation and better cooperation and regulation to make innovation really transformational in terms of bringing better healthcare to people is. And we can only do this together. We've seen it in COVID. Without your synthetic biology, without your data sciences, none of this would have happened as fast as it did in order to really help us fight the pandemic. And that is all driven by the recent advances over the last years in the biotechnologies and, of course, in artificial intelligence and data sciences. We have taken the work that we've done under the leadership of Sergio Dompe over the last 9 months to look at applicable and practical recommendations that would help inform your view on how to take this best forward and make it a tangible change to the better for the G20 going forward. So, what are the recommendations? Sergio already mentioned the term biorevolution. We stand in front of an unprecedented wave of innovation and with that new solutions, in particular in the life sciences over the next few decades that are deemed to add economic impact of about $2 to $4 trillion over the next 10 to 20 years. The biorevolution can be instrumental in helping to cure previously untreatable diseases because we have new and better tools in our hands. Just want to give you one example in order to make it tangible for you. We are working in our company on the first approaches and have already tests in real patients to potentially cure a totally devastating and in the end deadly disease, which is Parkinson's disease. What about the potential in a few years to have a treatment out there that would really cure and change the paradigm. So not only finding the next better medicines for a chronic disease, but really changing the paradigm, taking healthcare to the holy grail, which is the promise of cure. For that to happen, we need, as you said, Minister Speranza, the G20 to team up with the businesses and also with developing countries when it comes to better regulation, pro-innovation regulation, better funding, and let's say the rediscovery of how important health is as the most important thing for people that want to be actively participating in society. We need close research collaboration, we need data exchange, and we need regulatory convergence across the G20 and the developing countries in order to make that happen. Only with global collaboration as a major game changer will we be able to harness the potential benefits, which means the private sector, governments, associations, and academic institutions have to team up and work better together towards reaping the benefits of the biorevolution. Of course, health, as we have learned, is not a local and is not a national or a regional topic. When we talk about health today, this is a truly global conversation, and it therefore requires input from a variety of different voices. There is no better place to orchestrate and own this discussion than the G20. And for the G20 to make it productive, we from the business side stand ready to support you and drive a broad and actually broad humanitarian agenda going forwards. Let me finish by stressing that we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us that we cannot and must not waste. Reshaping global health post the pandemic experience will require global commitment towards embracing the biorevolution and strategically using science, technology, and funding to enable this transition. Let's work all together to make this sure that that happens, and let's make sure that we do not lose momentum and that we truly advance health for all. Thank you for your esteemed attention.
Thank you, Mr. Baumann, for your excellent intervention and reminding us of what Sergio stressed in his presentation this morning on the biorevolution, importance of accelerating innovation and adoption of innovations, very importantly, measuring health as an investment and building resilient health systems by better aligning health, economic, and industrial policies to strategically investing in science. But I think the key message from you was what I call the 3 I's. Increase investment, as Minister Speranza also said, increase investment in health, increase innovation, and inclusive collaboration. Very important themes, which I'm sure will be echoed by Mr. Jeff Martha's presentation. So Mr. Martha, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. First I want to thank the B20 for hosting this event today, and as we seek to tackle the biggest challenges in healthcare, as been mentioned before, this the 3rd I, this cross industry collaboration and public-private partnership is critical. I also want to thank Minister Speranza for your opening remarks and echo what Werner said about the strong stance that you're taking in Italy, regarding the vaccine. So I also find it inspiring and an example for us all. I'm Jeff Martha, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at Medtronic. Medtronic's a healthcare company with operations in more than 150 countries. And our mission at Medtronic is to use technology, which we're talking about a lot today, is to use technology to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. And in fact, we do that for more than 2 patients every second around the globe. And with technologies that are addressing more than 70 different conditions. Now, it is my absolute privilege to be here today, along with my fellow task force co-chairs and members representing the private sector in this work. So, first I'll start by saying, look, we must move with urgency here to tackle the challenges facing our global society. As was mentioned, healthcare is Werner just talked about it. It's not local. It's in addition to being local and national, it's truly global here. And right now, there's really nothing healthy about healthcare as we sit here today. Spending is going up, not down. People are going into hospitals sicker than ever. In countries all around the world, there are wide inequities among different racial, ethnic, and social groups. And all of this is further compounded by the issues of access. And we shouldn't accept this. We should not accept this situation. We have a wealth of technology that's right at our fingertips. We can harness this to address all of these challenges. Both better health outcomes, managing costs, even lowering costs, and driving up access. Discovery. We can discover conditions earlier. We can treat them earlier. We can even reduce disparities in care. But like I said, we must do this urgently. The world can't wait for someday. We need to accelerate the future, and we have an opportunity to do that. The pandemic has been a wake-up call. It has demonstrated how tightly health and wealth are connected, and as costs have skyrocketed, we're all facing a looming bill here. And against the backdrop of the pandemic, chronic disease has taken a backseat. And chronic disease is killing more than 41 million people each year. That represents nearly 3/4 of all deaths globally. And the rise in chronic disease in both developed and developing countries represents nothing less than a slow-moving disaster chasing at the heels of this pandemic. And so we must rethink the speed and the scale at which we can serve the world. We can help more people in more meaningful ways, and we can do it a whole lot faster. While some are benefiting, too many people are not, and this is our urgent responsibility. So, however, I am inspired by what's possible, and that I believe we're on the cusp of achieving. Imagine a world where lung cancer can be identified and diagnosed and treated in a single, minimally invasive event. A world where, regardless of where you live, you have access to the best surgeon for your case, and they can perform it from halfway around the world. A world where patients living with diabetes have care that is both predictable and even personalized. No finger sticks of any kind. A world where there's equal access for all. And I do know this world is possible. And to get there, it's critical, as been mentioned before, that governments adopt an investment mindset towards health. An investment mindset toward health versus looking at it as a cost. Investing in innovation can have a profound impact on outcomes, as well as provide an economic benefit, making healthcare more of an economic driver rather than a cost burden. And to make healthcare work for all, we have to democratize it. We have to make it more accessible. Like the internet, healthcare is everywhere, but not everyone has access to this. This is where technology and innovation play a critical role, addressing outcomes and access while reducing the overall cost of care, all at the same time. Innovation and technology will help patients be healthier, live longer, out of the hospital, and be able to contribute to society. This includes better self-management and disease prevention, like with obesity and diabetes, as well as better and earlier diagnosis, like with colon cancer or heart disease. And when acute care is needed, innovation can unlock more effective and less invasive treatment and fast recovery, such as with robotics and other digitally enabled technologies, which is a trend that I see having just a profound impact. But capturing these benefits from innovation requires a fundamental paradigm shift and collaboration. No one organization, no one country can do this alone. And the private sector needs to work with governments and vice versa. And so to accelerate our efforts, we must accelerate pro-innovation regulation. This includes promoting partnerships and regulatory frameworks that support unique development of pathways for the application of these new technologies that I speak of. Now, data plays an important role here too. And at Medtronic, we're proud to impact the lives of 80 million people a year. But combating the world's most complex healthcare challenges requires reaching millions more patients. I mean, 80 million sounds like a lot, but it's a small fraction of the world's population. And we need to do this not just every year, but reaching 80 million patients every day. And this is where data comes in. Data is critical to improving health outcomes and delivering at the speed and the scale today's world demands, making healthcare more predictive and even personalizing it. The pace of technology innovation is accelerating. Things like artificial intelligence is becoming pervasive in all of our daily lives, from smartphones to smart homes. And healthcare needs to keep pace, and it really hasn't. Driven by advancements in computational power, we're seeing communication networks, sensors, robotics, virtual reality, and AI exponentially improving. And these advancements are enabling the development of smart medical devices. And it's the data that will drive them. Data is the key. That's the currency going forward in healthcare. So for example, imagine a diabetes insulin pump that actually learns your patterns and gives you personalized guidance to better manage your insulin. And the potential goes far beyond improving the performance of individual devices. There's a vast opportunity to improve medical care overall. So with the advent of 5G, we can transport data faster, like millions of images and videos from surgeries around the world to train other physicians. Data is also the means to track outcomes and costs and to set models for achieving better results in relation to the money spent. So health data is among the most sensitive personal information, I realize this, and privacy and security must be protected. We stand on the cusp of using data and technology to accelerate great advances in prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. And we must find a way to protect privacy and security, but also at the same time enable this great innovation for patient benefit, as well as societal benefit. And these don't have to be mutually exclusive goals. The key here is for policymakers to shape rules specifically for the healthcare context and to harmonize those rules across jurisdictions to the greatest extent possible. The rules should be shaped with detailed input from healthcare stakeholders, including patients and clinicians, as well as the researchers and technology innovators in the new horizon of innovation's potential. So let me close by saying, look, I am optimistic, very optimistic for the revolution in innovation emerging globally, where you have providers who recognize the positive role that the healthcare technology industry will play. But the policy environment must advance and innovate in parallel to better enable the great potential for patients and healthcare systems. We're committed to creating a more accountable, a more equitable, and a more sustainable approach for patients everywhere. And we look forward to working with the G20 members to accelerate innovation and really rise to the opportunity that's before us, that's right before us. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Martha, for these very inspiring words. But you started by saying that nothing healthy about health systems, increasing costs, worsening inequalities, poor access. But I think your optimism came through very strongly in pushing forward this urgent agenda to accelerate innovation by achieving this paradigm shift to develop an investment mindset with a pro-innovation regulatory frameworks and harmonization, collaboration of all actors, and to democratize healthcare, and underpinned by data as the key enabler. So thank you for these very inspiring comments. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Wong.
So thank you, Sergio, and also thank you, Minister, for all the good introduction and also a wonderful speech. And I'm really encouraged by the positive energy in the room that we are helping developing country by allocating vaccine in a very even manner. I think COVID-19 and fighting COVID-19 collaboration has no border. I think this is really the spirit to move forward. So I'm very pleased to have been involved in this leadership work by B20. And it's really important time for the industry and government to work together on health and life science. So I think we need to answer to the questions that how can we learn from the pandemic and deliver better health outcome for the patients. I think lots of answers can be addressed in today's panels. The most interesting innovation are happening all together in the presence of biopharma, data, and digital technology. You will be hearing a lot of good example and rapid development and happening across the whole industry. I think it is particularly exciting in this period of innovation, and some of the most interesting developments are happening with all these three elements. When you bring data, medical technology, and the biopharmaceutical new technology, new medicine development, and really push things forward. So the way we AstraZeneca capitalize this new era, we can only be successful by working together. And what we have done previously, when we get this right innovation, can play a crucial role in building resilience in the healthcare system. Medicine and digital solution can help manage chronic disease and avoid hospitalization events like COPD exacerbation, heart failure, severe asthma attacks, and this really saves life and costs. Keeping people out of hospitals is also very important. Patients line up in the busy hospital healthcare system. And we have seen during COVID-19, and many systems are unable to absorb this kind of peak demand, and led to COVID-related deaths, especially a huge backlog in health service related to chronic disease and also cancer patients, which they cannot be treated in a timely manner. And also early detection and early intervention for many diseases is actually a key success factor. And we really needed to address this issue because it's unsustainable only manage severe disease and acute disease. We need early detection and early intervention timely to make sure patients can really live longer. And actually, innovation hubs are one of the most successful ways to driving collaboration, not only across industry, but also across the border in between emerging market and also developed country. I want to tell you more about AstraZeneca making major investment worldwide to create a healthcare ecosystem to bring digital, AI, R&D, and commercial together by therapeutic area, working with the society by society, key opinion leader by key opinion leader, and how we can really improve patient outcomes. And we're creating so-called innovation hubs. So we already established many innovation hubs across countries like China, Brazil, India, Argentina, Sweden, Russia, Poland. And we're now partnering with different stakeholders across medicine, technology, healthcare professionals, policymakers, venture capital, universities, academic, hospitals to develop innovative solutions by each therapeutic area. Each hub contributes to our patient-centric goal by addressing different challenges. Heartbeat is our India innovation hub. They are improving diagnostic capability for diabetes patients in India. Skolkovo, our innovation hub in Russia. They are startup accelerator and promoting opportunities for startup companies rising in Russia. HealthGate is our innovation hub in Gulf cluster countries. They are bringing the gap between patients and healthcare professionals. By pioneering technology such as big data, AI, and also Internet of Things, we are creating value to patients and healthcare system beyond medicine we deliver. Actually, AstraZeneca never believed we should, as a multinational company, because of this disease, country border become more splitting. Multinational company, instead of their own products in every country, we should take responsibility to work as a bridge between countries. And every year, we actually introduce one product from a small, medium-sized company from outside China into China. So we introduced one respiratory product from Vifor in Switzerland, and also Flumisil from Zambon in Italy, and Linzess from Ironwood. And this year will be another product from a Japanese company. So every year, we actually, multinational company, since the world is more splitting, we are acting more like a bridge to help technology spreading across the border. In Wuxi city, where AstraZeneca is based in China, actually we build innovation hubs, embodies all of this and delivering patients and also helping policymakers. To get a little deeper on the innovation hubs in Wuxi, we established this hub in 2017 on the integration of Internet of Things innovation. And we run into partnership with local government across China and over more than 200 local and multinational technology companies come together, and including companies like Medtronic, Danaher, GE, so all the big and the small companies in China. We developed 14 new diseases management solution, which are implemented in almost 7,000 healthcare institutions across China, and have helped more than 10 million patients through technology, and such as remote diagnosis using AI-powered and digital equipped ambulance to really help heart attack patients and connect them to the major hospital as soon as possible. So the Wuxi model actually gave us a glimpse on how we collaborate closely with all the stakeholders in the healthcare space. And now what we're doing is in Wuxi, we are helping every therapeutic area to build its own campus. Diabetes has its own campus, and with 50, 60 partners and venture capital, and across from early diagnosis and to function food, to treatment, and to 24-hour glucose monitoring. So all these become a total solution for every therapeutic area by working together. If we are going to capitalize on these digital innovation, we needed to invest in digital education as well. So we are hosting 850,000 people with our online education webcasts in China. And in the early days of pandemic, we hold a virtual session with millions of people and educate patients on how they take care of themselves at home. And we need to continue to build this kind of collaboration if we are to harness this unique moment to deliver our solution to the patients. So these are some examples on how we collaborate and impact patients, healthcare professionals, and the broader healthcare system stakeholders. We are delighted to continue being the partner of choice for governments and partners around the world in cross the border, collaborate with each other, and solving the problem together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for sharing with us these really excellent examples of what is possible and what is actually happening. And you mentioned the convergence of science and bioscience, data science, and communications, and how this is driving total solutions for patients and to enable earlier detection and treatment. But very importantly, how one can actually harness capabilities across all the stakeholders through the innovation hubs that you've established to develop patient-centered solutions through the distributed R&D networks and help move technology across borders. But all three speakers, and we have 10 minutes, and thank you for being so efficient. All of you mentioned, for me, sort of two very important themes, or three perhaps. One is the biorevolution with convergence of science and technology. Secondly, while this is happening, and we need to accelerate further, policy is lagging behind terribly. And third, all of this is going to be possible through digital enablement. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Wang, Mr. Martha, and Mr. Baumann, what would you like to see in terms of policy framework to enable more rapid adoption of digital technologies that is clearly underpinning many of the solutions you talked about.
Maybe
Yes.
I can take a step, Rifat. What I think all of us would like to see is that this unheard of level of collaboration, sense of urgency and speed that we have seen as part of the pandemic would be part of the new normal, where regulators and businesses work hand in hand in real time, rather than a lot of the things that we used to do before, and unfortunately might have to do going forward, being sequential. Second piece is a mindset element. And that is that regulators have to, of course, make sure that products are ultimately safe for the intended use. But there's a big difference between an innovation-oriented approach towards innovation and new solutions, or a, let's say, risk avoidance approach. So from where I sit, I guess I can also talk on behalf of my colleagues, we would like to see a more daring, risk-oriented approach that looks at the potential value and benefit of innovation, and then balances it with a commonsensical approach towards risk, rather than being, let's say, very, very conservative, almost in denial, of new solutions, new technologies. It has to be technology open, which if it's not, would make humanity forego an awful lot of opportunity for the better.
Excellent. Jeff, if I may, that's your first name, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Regarding data, I know that data provenance is the issues of data provenance are big issues. Privacy among them, and with the a lot of the tech companies out there have gotten some of the regulators very focused on this, and I don't want healthcare to get caught in that crossfire, because we're using data here for good reasons. I mean, to advance the products and therapies, and to personalize the therapy for patients. And so I think what we need is to assume, we need regulators, first of all, to assume positive intent here. It's not like we're using this data to advertise or anything like that. And so assume positive intent, and then we need to work together for a framework here, because a framework in which private industry and patients, we can work together on this, because I fear we're going in the wrong direction regarding data. And I do think you've got all this technical innovation happening right in here, in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and battery technology, all these things, miniaturization of electronics, the computing power, all of this is coming together right now and is at an inflection point. And data will be the limiter of our technology innovation going forward. Data is the limiter now. The more data we have, the more we can innovate. And that is a concept that I'm just personally getting my head wrapped around, and I fear that policy is going the wrong way. And I understand why, but we've got to course correct this.
Fantastic. This is really incredible. I'm going to try and sum up your comments, because I think we're really getting onto a completely new frontier here. But I'd like to first have comments from Leon as well.
Yeah, I think I really expect regulators and across the countries can recognize that. I think right now the approval for new technology, you usually only look at the technology by itself, regardless whether it's a device or whether it's a drug. So, but actually, holistically looking at the whole patient journey management, early detection, living in a very healthy way, even when you have disease. Actually, lots of cancer patients are frightened, and psychologically, psychology is their main problem, and nutrition, exercise. So there's never a kind of an integrated approach and a total solution. And across the country, we need a kind of unified approach on this kind of total solution to help patients in a more 360-degree dimension, rather than since I have this product, I want to sell this product. So I think we needed to, as an industry, we need to work together with herbal medicine, with nutrition, with exercise, so on helping patients at the end achieve a holistic solution rather than only one dimension of the truth.
Excellent. If I may sum up your comments, which will be a perfect segue to Ulrich Knudsen's session. I think you're calling, well, with much enthusiasm, it's very inspiring, this sense of urgency for speed and scale, as Jeff earlier alluded to, being the new normal, not going back to the old ways of constraining environments. Secondly, and this is going to require, as just secondly, a shift in the mindset and innovation orientation, balancing innovation benefits with the more traditional risk avoidance approaches that have constrained adoption and diffusion of innovations. And third, I really like the comment on assume positive intent in relation to data use and data benefits to develop highly personalized interventions. And as Leon said, integrated care across the whole journey, a 360-degree approach to develop total solutions. But Jeff, I think your comment regarding data, I think all of you commented, being the critical ingredient, the critical enabler, but also the limiting step going forward. So we have a paradox that needs to be addressed by policymakers and regulators to enable us to use data to harness the innovations that are coming through. So thank you for this wonderful set of interventions and discussion, and a perfect segue to Ulrich Knudsen's presentation from OECD. So Ulrich is Deputy Secretary General of OECD. So welcome, Ulrich, over to you.
Thank you so much. And let me start by expressing my gratitude for the invitation to speak here today. I'd also like to once again congratulate Minister Speranza for the excellent, successful health ministerial G20 earlier this month. As he said in Museo Capitolini, it was grand in every way. And thank you to B20 also for your comments, your very insightful comments at the meeting. I think, as you will gather from my intervention, both Mr. Baumann, Mr. Martha, and Mr. Wang, it's not only a pleasure to share this stage with you, but I think you will gather that there is a lot of like-mindedness in how we see the situation. After 8 long months of the COVID-19 pandemic, it does continue to have a profound impact on individuals and their families, on economies, and our health systems are not least, of course. And I would agree with Jeff Martha that they're not in the best of shape. Countries, of course, are still engaged in tackling the pandemic, but it's also important to turn our attention to the challenge of how to prevent another pandemic. Several eminent reviews have recommended actions to prevent future pandemics, including the need to maintain engagement at the highest level of government and the critical importance of increasing investment in health systems, particularly perhaps in low-income countries. Most political attention is, and maybe that's understandable, is on improving pandemic preparedness. But I'd also like to argue that such an approach will not succeed unless countries also take urgent steps to tackle what we could call the chronic underinvestment in our health systems. So I therefore welcome very much the B20 contribution to this debate, both the recommendations in your policy brief and the event you have organized this afternoon. So let me say a few words, if I may, on how OECD work links to your 3 recommendations. And I'll take them one by one. First, the strategic use of science, technology, and data. And I very much agree with everything that's been said about how crucial data is in all of this. Now, your policy paper accurately describes the pandemic as a game changer. I think it's right, it's nothing less than that. We've seen the development and production of vaccines at record-breaking pace, and testing programs emerged on an unprecedented scale, but much remains to be done to ensure equitable access for all. We've also seen a huge acceleration in the use of digital technologies and health data information systems, but here again, we need to do more, and of course, business has a critical role. To start, we need to improve real-time analysis, reduce data silos, increase data linkages across healthcare systems, and improve data disaggregation to understand, for example, the real impact of COVID-19 and other health shocks on vulnerable groups. But for these efforts to be sustainable, patients need to trust that their health data will be properly managed. The OECD has been a leader in promoting privacy for over 40 years, for example, with a recommendation on health data governance that explicitly promotes privacy and data security. Related to this, trusted connectivity will also be key. Ransomware attacks on several hospitals earlier this year really do underscore the importance of digital security in healthcare systems. Smart medical devices themselves must also be trustworthy and resilient to digital security risks. And finally, in order to take full advantage of digital health solutions, we must make progress in further narrowing digital divides across rural and urban areas and across income groups and even across gender. The OECD recommendation on broadband connectivity provides a roadmap for governments to facilitate investment that achieves connectivity for all. It does so through promoting competition and reducing barriers to infrastructure development. Secondly, about value-based healthcare. The recent COVID-19 reviews have all emphasized the chronic underfunding of health systems, as I said. Of course, it's too simplistic to say that countries simply need to spend more on health to fix the problem. The reality is that countries are saddled with extremely high levels of debt incurred as they struggle to keep their economies afloat, and not least in the early days of this pandemic. At the recent G20 meeting, health ministers found a new rallying cry that health is an investment, not a cost. Finance minister rightly and understandably want to know what they're getting in return for that investment. So the relevance of value-based healthcare has never been greater. There is an urgent need to move away from the measurement of inputs to measuring instead outputs. In other words, do patients see a tangible improvement in their quality of life as a result of the treatment that they get? It was for exactly this reason that in 2017, OECD health ministers asked the OECD to develop a new way to measure health system performance. And it became what we called the Patient-Reported Indicator Survey. In short, that's Paris. And it's a total coincidence that we're also based here in Paris, of course. But the results from this survey will be, I think, another game changer, placing the patient at the center of healthcare. Your policy brief also draws attention to the work of the Global Innovation Hub for Improving Value in Health. This was launched during Saudi Arabia's G20 presidency, which the OECD was also very actively supporting, like we did with the Italian just now. I'm sure the hub will welcome a more private sector engagement, to be honest. The third and last topic, resilient health systems. Even the best resourced health systems were found wanting when COVID-19 first emerged. They lacked resilience on many fronts, something which countries need to address urgently. Again, this will need more investment. We estimate that it'll require the equivalent of 1.5% of GDP in additional investments across OECD countries. There are many, of course, dimensions to making health systems truly resilient. I've already touched on digital health and data, but I'd like to single out three more. The health workforce, strong primary healthcare, and robust supply chains, not least. On the first one, an adequate and properly skilled health workforce is vital. 2021 is the year of the health and care worker, so let's ensure that once and for all, the world tackles the global shortage of health and care workers, and at the same time, equip them with the skills needed to work in digitally enabled health systems. Second one, we need to transform primary healthcare. As populations age, we see rising numbers of people living with multiple chronic conditions such as diabetes and cancer. Primary care services are best placed to support them. So while we've seen some encouraging innovations, including reorganizing the delivery of primary healthcare services and reaching tasks and responsibility, Much more need to be done. I would emphasize the need to improve the prevention of ill health, where funding at around only 3% of health expenditure remains woefully inadequate. Finally, as B20 members will acutely be aware, supply chains were unable, at least temporarily, to meet the surge in demand. Many national solutions were identified, but here, as in many other areas, the answer really lies in international cooperation and multilateral solutions, not national ones. Keeping markets open and flowing by disciplining export restrictions, by reducing tariffs, by streamlining trade-related processes at and behind the border are key really to ensuring timely access to vaccines and other essential health goods for all. We must also promote international regulatory cooperation. We must increase transparency on essential goods, work with the private sector towards diversified and resilient supply chains, and finally, we must develop effective buffering strategies where appropriate. Of course, we should not forget that many low-income countries have a long way to go to improve even the most basic health services, let alone achieve universal health coverage. Here, again, private sector investment is critical to meet the financing gap. Our new measure of total official support for sustainable development, TOSD, has been designed to increase transparency, accountability, and oversight on global health and health security financing. Just as an example, TOSD will ensure that expenditure on research for health-related issues is captured and monitored. So let me conclude by saying that there is a long journey ahead to reshape global health to face the challenges of the 21st century. The importance of partnerships will be even greater if we are to make these necessary changes happen. I'm delighted to see that Minister Sadikin will be speaking later today as Indonesia finalizes plans for their G20 presidency next year. I would encourage consideration of the proposal to bring G20 and B20 together for a joint meeting to build momentum behind this vital agenda and identify some tangible deliverables. I think even closer collaboration between G20 and B20, and we at the OECD would like to be part of that and help the best we can, really is crucial to moving this agenda ahead. And it's been a pleasure to listen to the three private sector representatives just now. I see so much common ground, to be honest. I can assure you, and that'll be my final word, that the OECD remains ready to support work towards resilient, value-based and sustainably financed health systems. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you, Ulrich. This is a perfect way of linking what has been said by Werner, Jeff, and Leon. But just to summarize, I think some very important messages as emerged in the earlier presentations. Just focus not just on managing the pandemic, COVID-19, but also the chronic disease pandemic that we currently have, but also prepare for the next. And that's going to require development of value-based, resilient, sustainable health systems. But there's chronic underinvestment in health systems. And for us, and to address this, we need to really make a strategic use of science and technology. And you mentioned three major areas, which is a perfect segue to the thematic sessions that we're going to have. The first was digital, use of digital solutions for health, integrated data, real-time analytics, but building trust with citizens and patients on data privacy and security, with trusted connectivity and reducing data divide. Value-based healthcare, and we are very fortunate to have Rim Albunyan, who can talk about this, to focus on results, outputs, and outcomes that really matter to patients. And Paris Initiative is a wonderful platform for this. And resilient health systems that are going to require increased investment, both public and private sector, 1.5% of GDP. But all doing this through partnerships and especially G20, B20 collaboration. But for you as OECD, just in the last minute, what would you like to see from G20 as the next important step to make all this happen in terms of action?
Was that a question for me?
Yes, I know it's this.
Right. No, that's fine. I have to say that we normally at the G20 meetings and preparations of G20 meetings, we take a backseat in the sense that we tell the presidency that we are able to help. We give them a menu of the areas where we think we can contribute to the discussion. And then we let the G20 members use the international organizations as they see fit, and this is why we have you could say this humble approach. But if you read between the lines, I think it's clear that we also think that there is need for more work to stimulate investment, and we're relying on health ministers and finance ministers to come up maybe with the goods on that. When they meet, they have a joint meeting. I don't think it's taken place yet, but that's something I think that the health ministers are really looking forward to be in the same room as the finance ministers to get that discussion, maybe to add some credibility to that discussion. Then on the topics that we've discussed here today, the digitalization of the health sector, the importance of data, the importance of pandemic preparedness. Those are other issues. I hope that future G20 presidencies will build on the rather impressive results of the Italian presidency. And then, as I said, partnerships are the future. That this is not only for the health sector. This is if we want to solve the climate change challenge, if we want to have an equitable, balanced globalization, not least to save globalization itself, the trading system. If we want to solve so many other issues on digital transformation on this globe, I think the health sector is right in there with them. It's going to take some more regulation, but we can't regulate in a vacuum. We need business on board there. So I wholeheartedly believe that stronger cooperation, more dialogue between G20 and B20 will be beneficial also in this area.
Great, thank you. So G20, B20 has played a very important role, and I sense very strong enthusiasm, and I think Italian presidents was able to harness this enthusiasm, but I think, as you said, translating this intention to action will require substantial investment, 1.5% of GDP. But I think investment is the operative word here. Health should not be seen as a cost, but it's really an investment for better health outcomes and better societal well-being and economic growth. So thank you, Ulrich, for your very valuable contributions and bringing it all together, which provides a very good basis for the next 3 sessions, the thematic sessions. The first is on innovation and biorevolution, as emerged from the first, from all the discussions. The second is on value-based healthcare, and the third is on digitalization. So I'm going to ask the panelists. First of all, huge thanks to you, Ulrich, but also to Werner, Jeff, and Leon for their outstanding contributions. In this panel, we have Gisela Habel, who's the Deputy Head of G7, G20 Sherpa Office in the Federal Chancellery of Germany. And we have Timothy Liu, who's head of Senti Biosciences, a fellow colleague from MIT and Harvard, and Matthias Evers, who's the co-author of Biorevolution. So I'm going to ask Gisela and give her the floor. Gisela, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you to you all for the opportunity to participate in today's discussion on reshaping global health and implementation. Let me perhaps just highlight that the regular dialogue with engagement groups such as B20 is always important for these processes such as G7 and G20 to get input on key areas of our discussions by you, the experts, and also feedback on identified key challenges and commitments, and of course their implementation. Yeah, I think the speakers before, Italian health ministers and others, they already highlighted the key challenges in the global health for current and future pandemics. And I would like to focus now in my brief input on the issue of equitable global access to therapeutics, diagnostics, and in particular vaccines at the moment, because there I could a bit share our practical experiences. G20 has really, I think, a very important role in this issue. And if I go back, I can go back to the leaders' commitment in March 2020, which was the basis for the launch of the global initiative ACT Accelerator, jointly with the WHO and global partners and initiatives such as Gavi, CEPI, and the Global Fund, with the aim to better coordinate global efforts for development, production, and distribution of therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines. Ulrich Knudsen just highlighted also the important issue of health systems, which is also part of the ACTA's work. Germany, the Chancellor Merkel, she has from the very beginning actively supported the ACTA as a crucial multilateral initiative. And so Germany is the second biggest donor with 2.2 billion euros for ACTA. As we all know, the situation has developed over the last year and a half. Once we had developed successfully vaccines, it became clear that global production is the key bottleneck for equitable global access. And that was the basis for the start of the Vaccine Manufacturing Working Group and Task Force in the COVAX. There was a mandate by G20 leaders in the Global Health Summit under Italy's presidency in May in Rome. And this group, which is co-chaired by Germany and South Africa, has the objective to give high political support to increase global production through very concrete solutions. Other partners in this group are Brazil, China, Korea, India, Indonesia, the next G20 presidency, Norway, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, and USA. And the group developed, as I said, very concrete solutions, for example, a marketplace for manufacturers to exchange information on availability of crucial input. Also a discussion and commitments on booster vaccinations, on single vials, on the delayed use of single vials, also to interlinkage with WTO to have discussions on political and legal barriers and export restrictions. And last but not least, how to increase local production in least developed countries. The G20 leaders also mandated the group with a report to the G20 summit, which will be now end of October in Rome. If I look to 2022, Indonesia will be the new G20 presidency, taking over in December this year, and Germany will take over the G7 presidency. We do not know the priorities yet, and as you might know, we have an election upcoming in Germany, so we don't know who will be our new chancellor. However, I would expect that health and the fight against current and future pandemics will be high on the agenda in both processes. And so I could imagine that it remains really highly important that groups like yours continues to develop recommendations. And I can assure you, independent on how the election will play out and what will be the result, Germany has always attached highest priority to the exchange with engagement groups. And I would expect our new government to do so. Perhaps my last point, just from my experience on the processes, I would always recommend the fewer, the concreter and the more action-oriented your recommendations are, the easier it is for at least Sherpas and who are the ones who are preparing the summit of the leaders to take it into account and to react on it. Second, as long as there's a clear reference to the priority of the presidency, and in this case, as I said, I would expect that the pandemic will remain a priority. makes it much easier to also take it up in the summit and react to it. And then third, if possible, I always thought that a direct dialogue with Sherpas and the Sherpa teams also helps a lot, I think, to make Sherpas aware of your work and of your key recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gisela, for these very important insights into the process and very good guidance for the work of B20-G20. And you mentioned you emphasize the importance of continuing to develop concrete recommendations, actionable recommendations. Could you give us some examples? What might be seen as a sort of concrete recommendation, and how bold this could be? Because I see a strong enthusiasm from B20-G20 group here.
Naya, no, probably I can't give you a group a good idea because I think you are way too expert for me. But I mean, I can say that really before, because I was really closely involved in the summit in 2020, in the March summit, which was the basis for the launch of ACTA. And there, I think the idea to have, and that it was really coming from different groups, from foundations, but also from industry and also from initiatives such as CEPI and Gavi. I mean, that we need something which brings us together, because we will need the knowledge and the expertise from different groups. I think that was really very valuable. And I remember when we had the summit in March, we did not know that we would launch ACTA like 6 weeks later. It was just in the summit communique, there was a commitment that we would need a platform, a global, something multilateral where we bring these efforts together. So I'm not sure if this is now a very useful recommendation for you, but I think, if you make us aware of concrete needs, and if I speak as I speak for the Sherpa office, we are the ones who prepare the summit of the heads of government. So the more technical it becomes, we don't understand it anymore. So, and if we don't understand, it's always also difficult to bring it in a communique. But something high level, something which shows how difficult or where there is a gap of coordination or a gap of a financing facility, then that makes it easier, I think, to really also react. And then we need it early also. The later in the process, the more difficult, because then the communique drafting has started and then it becomes very difficult to bring something in. And a line in a communique is great. So, it has to be, you have to be able to make it as short as 1 or 2 lines to bring it in the communique. And perhaps let me just one thing which I did not mention, but I thought it could be interesting for you. I elaborated on this vaccine manufacturing working group under the co-chair of Germany and South Africa, because it's the German Sherpa who is doing the co-chair, which is a very special structure and which shows how important this issue is for Germany at the moment. And this is, for example, a great idea if you want to join something closely to the G20, because if you have a Sherpa involved, then of course he will inform the other Sherpas in every session. So I think this is, for example, also something where you can draw lessons for your approach upon. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gisela. So wonderful opportunity for greater G7, G20 collaboration to have joint action to address the issue you identified in the beginning, this equitable global access through partnerships and through accelerated innovation and investment. So I'd like to hand over to Tim Liu.
Great. Good afternoon to everyone, and it's a tremendous opportunity to be here today. My goal today is to try to share with you some of the recent innovations that are happening in the therapeutic space. I think with COVID-19, we've seen exciting new types of drugs and medicines that have come out. And today, what I'd like to talk about are a class of new medicines called cell and gene therapies, and some of the exciting opportunities ahead of us as we see these medicines make their way into the clinic and being deployed. So cell and gene therapies are really a revolutionary class They basically involve the ability to reprogram our own cells. So in the case of a cell therapy, oftentimes what's happening is we're taking cells, we're genetically modifying them, and reintroducing them into the patient's body to treat disease. With gene therapy, we're delivering typically a functional copy of a gene directly into the body to compensate for abnormal genes, or to even deliver things like elements of the COVID virus to try to trigger a vaccine response. So this is really an exciting and breakthrough new way of trying to treat important diseases. The first generation of cell and gene therapies were really made possible over many, many decades of research, optimizing the manipulation of cells and the genetic engineering of cells. And the industry now has a growing number of techniques and strategies to try to manipulate genes and deliver this sort of genetic medicine into patients. That being said, the industry is still a pretty nascent phase. In Europe, only 11 or so advanced therapeutic medicinal products have a valid market authorization, but there are over 1,000 experimental therapies in clinical development these days. Currently, the vast majority of these products are genetically modified and are delivered into patients, but basically have no significant level of control once they've already gone into the body. So we call these sort of point and shoot type medicines, where once the cell therapy or gene therapy is introduced into the patient, the physician or the patient thereafter has no way of turning it on or off, or changing its behavior. So most of these drugs so far have been used against specific diseases, either very rare or orphan genetic diseases, where it's a clear genetic cause of the disease that you're trying to go in and fix, or to cancer applications where there's a significant unmet need and a really clear target that one may want to go after. However, most of the diseases that we're interested in going after really aren't so simple or as well defined. So in cancer, for example, cancer has many ways of escaping from single target therapies. They can evolve and sort of escape from those issues. If you think about autoimmune disease or neurological diseases, those are certainly also very complicated. It's usually not just a single target or a single pathway that you're trying to go after. And so because of that, there's still a tremendous opportunity to improve the precision and the targeting ability of these sort of novel therapeutics. And that's where I would love to tell you a bit about synthetic biology and how that can actually be used to take the cell and gene therapy revolution to the next step. Synthetic biology refers to a new interdisciplinary field that combines engineering and science together to really allow us to reprogram biology at its most fundamental level. So using new and accelerating technologies such as DNA sequencing and DNA synthesis, we can go in and fundamentally reprogram the DNA that underlies our cells' functions. One example of this is gene editing. I'm sure many of you have heard of the term CRISPR. CRISPR, won the Nobel Prize. Basically, it's a technology that allows you to go into the cell and make small deletions. I think of it sort of like the delete button on your keyboard. You can go in and make a tiny deletion of a particular sequence in your DNA. What synthetic biology now is allowing us to do is access the rest of the keyboard. So we can go and reprogram and create new DNA sequences. And by doing that, we really can gain much greater control over what some of these cell or gene therapies are doing in the body. So our vision ultimately is to be able to use these DNA programs to reprogram cells to be able to sense, compute, and respond in the body. And by doing so, we can engineer new drugs that are able to adapt and to be able to respond to diseases that are more complicated, ones that change over time, or ones that may only occur in certain portions of the body. So as an example of this, we've built cells that are able to sense multiple targets, do some sort of biological logic, an AND gate, an OR gate, a NOT gate, to be able to respond to those targets, and then more precisely kill cancer cells while sparing healthy tissues. Now, more powerful DNA synthesis and sequencing technologies are continuing to be developed in the industry, and that's enabling companies like SentiBio, as well as others in the field, to really take an engineering approach to developing these sort of drugs. Instead of a more traditional setting where we basically take a large, gigantic chemical library, we do a high throughput, essentially random screen to pick out drugs that have the behavior we want. We now go through a engineering cycle where we can design, we build, we test, and then we learn from those experiments as to which designs are working well, which ones are not. And that allows us to really rapidly iterate, similar to how computer engineering or mechanical engineering is done. And we see that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. Operations that just may have taken months in a lab, even just a decade ago, are now being performed in weeks. And I think the field has much to go in the future. So I'm very excited today about the progress synthetic biology and cell and gene therapies have made in the clinic. I think this is a whole new class of medicines that have the potential to treat diseases in ways that are not currently possible, ones that can basically sense, compute, and respond in our body. Certainly, there are going to be significant translational challenges to moving these sort of innovations into the clinic more efficiently, as well as to enable broader access. One of the major bottlenecks in providers in the cell and gene therapy space is enabling manufacturing. Many of the products that we're developing here are more complex than the traditional chemical drugs or antibody drugs that we're used to. And so being able to manufacture at high quality, but also to do this at a reasonable cost, also to allow distributed manufacturing so it's not just concentrated in one location, and also to move to a scenario where we can use patients, instead of using just the patient's own cells, perhaps even donor cells that can be manufactured and used in off-the-shelf fashion is very important. In addition, I think there's some really interesting regulatory challenges to think about in this space. When you can start iterating and engineering and improving your medicines at a faster rate. One of the ideas people in this field have is similar to your iPhone. Could you actually really update or create better and better versions of the product in a very rapid fashion? And I think we're actually on the precipice of having that technological capability. And that's going to pose some really interesting questions in terms of how do we regulate these sort of medicines? When you have medicines that can be updated every couple of years or in response to how these are performing in the clinic, how do we build a regulatory system that potentially can adapt to that and let us harness the power of being able to reprogram biology to treat disease? So tackling all these challenges will certainly be complicated and will require many stakeholders around the table. I'd be happy to discuss this further with folks here or thereafter. But I hope I've been able to share with you today some of the exciting developments that are on the horizon. This ability to build cell and gene therapies that can sense, compute, and respond in our bodies to disease, and should open up a whole new class of medicines available to treat many of the most difficult diseases that we're facing today. So with that, thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Tim, for providing us a glimpse into some of the exciting developments in the biorevolution that earlier speakers talked about, specifically focusing on cell and gene therapies, but also the promise of, well, more than a promise, actually, the application of synthetic biology with gene editing and other interventions. But you mentioned sort of engineering approach to designing new medicines and how this can be developed iteratively. But you, as earlier panelists, you identified the regulatory challenge. You also talked about translational challenge. What would you like to see in terms of how system change? Because Gisela earlier talked about concrete recommendations. So what could be done to address this translation gap that's going to emerge?
That's wonderful questions. I think because that upstream engineering cycle, the ability to design, build, test, and iterate on these products is accelerating. Right now, typically where these products get bottlenecked in a sense in terms of delivery is in the clinical study phase. And that's because oftentimes, our ability to redesign and optimize the gene circuit and then move it forward into the program, ultimately we have to test this and prove safety and efficacy in humans. And typically in that process, there's two major areas. One is on the manufacturing side, the global sort of supply of contract manufacturers or manufacturing resources to make these sort of products still remains highly constrained. And so companies oftentimes spend a lot of capital, a lot of time and money preparing those products, that many of them, just in terms of the scale required. I think number two, and I think many of the regulators are thinking about this in creative ways together with the companies, is once you've proven that, for example, like version 1 of the product, is safe in the patient and works well, and now you have version 2 or version 3 that you've optimized in the lab, is there a way of bridging those products into the clinic faster? Understanding that we don't want to sacrifice safety and efficacy, but are there metrics, quantitative metrics we can learn about in those studies that give us some correlation that we can correlate back to the work that we're doing in the lab to try to give everyone comfort that this imaging can be done. And so I think methods like that will be quite important going forward to try to be able to bring these sort of innovations forward much more quickly. And it will require us to actually try to build a better understanding of what makes how do we measure safety and efficacy, and what are the key sort of surrogate biomarkers we can use in the clinic, so that we can actually do that comparison between version 1, version 2, version 3 much more rapidly. One of the challenges, lastly, I'll just mention, we face in the field is oftentimes there's certainly many different types of regulators all over the globe, and so there's not necessarily a unified way in which people view cell and gene therapies, and certainly for the companies that are developing drugs in this space, navigating sort of that network of regulations can be challenging. And so the more perhaps there's a streamlined position on how to develop sort of these cell and gene therapies, perhaps provides the developers and the clinicians here in the space a little bit more guidance on how to bring these forward more efficiently.
Thank you, Tim. I think there's a very clear theme emerging from starting with Sergio's intervention and those by Jeff Werner and also Leon, that science and innovations are happening happening very rapidly, but to achieve speed and scale that Jeff talked about, there needs to be some shift in the policy environment and regulation. So clearly we need to re-engineer the policy environment and the regulatory frameworks to adopt these innovations. So that's a very good moment to ask Matthias Evers, who's author of Biorevolution reports, which I very much enjoyed reading. I'm sure he'll be able to comment on some of these issues. Matthias, over to you.
Thank you, Rifat. And in fact, thank you, Mr. Speranza, dear B20. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here to you and to the Health Task Force. So I'm in fact author of this year-long research that led to the Biorevolution. And I hope I make your next 5 minutes worth your while. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the scope, impact, and implications of the Biorevolution. I took the liberty to take a few slides to introduce that, and I hope this works seamlessly, and it seems to work if you see the slides. And because back in 2019, just pre-COVID, before this really severe pandemic hit us, we asked around, is there a biological force similar to digital that's impacting healthcare and perhaps also other industries? Our observation was, in fact, that there are a number of underlying trends that have exponential progress. And so we indeed found something, and we called it the Biorevolution, and we define it as a confluence of breakthroughs. And as quite a few of my speakers here before me talked about, this confluence between progress in bioscience, this computing, automation, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. The spread here is quite broad. I mean, we can innovate new biomolecules, but also, as Tim just talked about, we can modify and engineer biosystems, to stay here brief. What is underlying this? This is not a matter of small innovations coming together. We believe, if you really screen that space, that there are a couple of cross-cutting capabilities that really fundamentally change the game and offer new innovation opportunities. To mention a few of these cross-cutting capabilities, we can engineer biology to produce new materials that have new properties, are more sustainable. We can precisely target actions. And I mean, for instance, when we talk about how we modify and program cells, what is underlying it is a handful of technologies. And Tim just before mentioned synthetic biology, so I won't repeat that. There's a whole branch of omics technologies. And we see also this is beyond the classical capability stack of a pharmaco. And maybe that brings me back to Leon, to this kind of collaboration across diagnostics, biopharmaceutical innovation, etc. Now, an obvious question will be, I mean, how does that innovation look like? And I will give you a little bit the impact in numbers, but some examples here up front. I mean, we heard already about the cell therapy, but I would also include next generation pharmaceuticals, omics-based innovations, and digital therapeutics, which could be part of a whole total package. And this is more for the audience to illustrate a little bit what's the substrate of innovation we are talking about. Now, for all the stakeholders in this, does this actually have impact? I mean, we did a bottom-up analysis of 400 use cases and applications and estimated the direct economic impact. Secondary impact here is not included. I mean, if we start with human health and performance, there we talk about a potential up to $1.3 trillion. And I would argue that this is measured as impact, and this goes maybe beyond the discussion here, but we see it as an investment because you can also measure the return on this investment. But what's also interesting here is that when you look into consumer products and services, there are many applications that are close to healthcare and a broadening range of healthcare, if you think from staying healthy, prevention, all the way to treating sickness. To make this a little bit more memorable, here are a couple of very big figures that illustrate the scale of this biorevolution. I would draw your attention to the 45%. So we looked at the visible innovation, and we estimated that 45% of the world's disease burden could be reduced by fully implementing the biorevolution over the next 10, 20 years. Of course, more is possible. While the other three figures are only adjacent to healthcare, it's important to keep in mind that this can lead to a more sustainable world, which is, of course, keeps us healthier. And also we can provide more sustainable and more better materials into the economy. Now, if we see this impact, I think I have the obligation also to talk about the risk, because we are all excited about the biorevolution. I'm personally excited about. And not to stress the point too much, but biology is highly interconnected. So there's actually a regulatory challenge, also a scientific challenge. How do we engineer? Because that I'm also a believer that will be the future, as my Tim as a speaker before just said. But also value systems differ when we speak about engineering. When do we allow staying healthy as a goal of an intervention? When not? It's a big discussion. This also brings me to my landing slide on 5 implications, and I will carefully go through them. Number 1, biology-based business models. If we bring these innovations, maybe I use the word of a total solution that was used before together, we have the chance to move from sick care to healthcare, which is then including diagnostics, prevention, etc. True personalization is possible, and I would add the sentence even with technology from today. Who is saying we cannot have the smart bathroom, the smart kitchen that keeps us hyper healthy by connecting those industry domains, which is the third point, the value chain disruption and new modeling of existing industries around us that keeps us healthy. This drives a confluence of disciplines and often also across the private and public sector, which I think is a crucial collaboration here. And that again leads me to the big role of social and regulatory influence, because as I just said, the value systems differ, but it's also generally difficult how to manage, regulate these types of innovations. I know this was a very quick 5-minute run. The full research is available for everyone who has an interest. And with that, Rifat, I give it back to you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. And clearly the time available doesn't do justice to the very comprehensive and really excellent report that you've done. But I think a number of sort of themes keep on sort of emerging regarding sort of confluence and convergence of science in this biorevolution. But some of the risks you identified in relation to regulatory environment, but also effect. But all of this is going to require digital environments, data, regular analytics to learn and iteratively improve, as Tim alluded to in his presentation. So completely new, not just the mindset, a new environment to enable us to harness these developments. And maybe just to continue, just very briefly, we've got sort of 2 minutes. In terms of the regulatory environment, what should change? I mean, Tim was very precise, being an engineer, on what he's recommended. What would you identify as some of the important changes that need to happen?
I mean, it's a difficult question, Rifat, and even 1 minute, I don't dare to have a real answer, but I would highlight 2 themes maybe back for the discussion. The one is around data, and we follow a very simple, almost storyline or logic, because if this is true, and we believe there's a lot of evidence also listening to everyone that this revolution is in the making, then we say we bring together human ingenuity and in many ways digital AI, etc. If that's true, we need high quality, comprehensive longitudinal data already of healthy people. I mean, that's way too late when we are sick. That again requires an environment where we as individuals actually have access to our data. I don't know if you have, I mean, I have problems getting my data. And so then we would be able to also donate that data. So that's one stream, which is not directly regulating the innovation, but how do we allow such an almost logical chain? On the regulation itself, I think I'm pretty much with Tim, because we have to, I think if we bring the tech principles into biology, and biology itself is of course a self-replicating, a self-modifying, improving system, how do we allow for versioning? How do we manage risk already? And a big question I have no answer to, but I would love to raise it as a big question. How do we think about interventions when we are still healthy, to stay healthy and perhaps hyper healthy?
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. So I think this session was really excellent in giving us insights into some of the exciting developments in the biorevolution. And the next panel is very appropriate in finding instruments and ways to transform health systems to enable us to create greater value. And I cannot think of a better group than Reem Al-Bunyan, who is Director of the Center for Improving Value in Health at the Ministry of Health in Saudi Arabia, Iskra Reich from Executive Vice President for Europe and Canada for AstraZeneca, and Rob ten Hoet, who is Executive Vice President and President of EMEA at Medtronic, and has been a strong champion and proponent of value-based approaches. So, Reem, over to you.
Thank you very much, and greetings to the audience today. And it's a true pleasure to be part of this important B20-G20 dialogue that in itself is an example of bringing together public and private sectors for a very important conversation. And I congratulate the Italian presidency for this. At the beginning, I'd like to just build on what we heard in the previous hour or so, which has been truly refreshing and an example of how aligned we are in the need to transform our health systems. We heard about the rising number of people suffering chronic disease. We heard about the need to accelerate innovation and accelerate adoption of innovation. We heard about data and the importance of data-informed decision-making. One thing I'd like to add as a challenge that's a global challenge is with regards to waste, the waste that we have in our health systems. And I quote a study that was done by the OECD that estimates crudely about 20% of expenditure, total expenditure of health in the US being wasteful. And it's quite similar in other health systems. And perhaps it's closer to 50% in reality. Another point I'd like to make is with regards to complexity. And I think that's what our panel is going to highlight, is the complexity of transformation, complexity of bringing change. And this links closely to the need to change policies, to change the way we provide care, and the transformation of our health systems. The Global Innovation Hub for Improving Value in Health is an entity that was born out of the Saudi Arabian presidency last year. And it's basically an entity that aims to accelerate movement towards value-based health systems globally through knowledge sharing and collaboration, very much the spirit of the conversation that we're having today. It's a multilateral organization with voluntary membership. Now, so far, we have 15 countries in addition to international organizations, the OECD, the WHO, and the Islamic Development Bank. brings together governments, international organizations, and other major players in the ecosystem. In addition to the knowledge sharing and accelerating transformation objective, the hub continues to be anchored with the G20, and we heard this in the early remarks, the importance of the G20 in policy and policy change. And in the conversation around COVID-19 response and preparedness for future pandemics, the hub is bringing forward the voice of the need for health systems to transform in order to address all the challenges that we were just speaking about. We're putting forward a paper for the Joint Health and Finance Group to address these very points. And I want to sort of transition from speaking about the hub into giving a real example. And the example I'm going to give is from my own country, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where we had the real interest in having such a multilateral body in order to learn from other health systems how they're transforming, learn what can be transferred from one health system to another. In the Kingdom, we are having a national transformation of our health system, which is a unique transformation in the sense that it's transforming every element of the system towards the quadruple aim. And we intend to do that through having a health system that's person-centric and value-based. And this is part of the vision that has been articulated very clearly at the highest level in the country, where healthcare delivery is going to be redesigned to be delivered through health clusters that represent integrated health systems that serve their respective populations. With this, the ministry will transform into a pure modern regulator for the system, in addition to implementing a new standalone financing entity that will allow and continue to be aligned with the quadruple aim as an objective. And within the system, I personally lead the center that you introduced me with, which is the Center for Improving Value in Health, which in itself is a catalyst. The center is reading back to the system the progress that's being made. And this is extremely helpful. I mean, and I quote some of the things that we heard earlier in today's conversation. So as a catalyst, the center is coordinating important national projects, such as the Paris Project. Although the Kingdom is not a member of the OECD, we joined the OECD's Paris Project in alignment with the vision of our transformation in health. And we heard in the keynote intervention by the OECD, this being described as a game changer. In addition, and I realize that I'm being followed by an intervention by Medtronic, the center is also reading back an example of a public-private partnership that the Ministry of Health has with Medtronic in the diabetes model. And we look forward to looking at how this model, which is unique in the sense that it's being applied in the Saudi health system after its success in other health systems, and us learning how this application can be scaled and accelerated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reem, for sharing with us the developments with the Global Innovation Hub, but also the transformations that are happening in the Kingdom. But I think a critical message from your presentation is that value-based healthcare is a catalyst for transforming health systems, which was clearly identified as a need by the earlier speakers, and learning from each other to improve health systems. So we'll now have some practical examples of how this can be achieved in different settings. I'd like to welcome Iskra Rage to share her experience with us. Iskra.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I must say I'm really pleased to hear that we are all repeating, if I may say, the same ambition and the same objective. So I think it's really great to see the impact of the latest focus of the B20 Health and Life Science Task Force that really put emphasis on how to accelerate the transition of value-based healthcare. And here I also want to recognize the great effort and the leadership from Sergio Dompe, but I also want to congratulate Italian team and especially Italian Minister of Health, Mrs. Speranza. It was really encouraging to hear his earlier comments in this meeting today. I think we would probably all agree on the point that the crisis definitely offered the opportunities for us to accelerate the change in the way how the healthcare is seen. And I think that one of the messages that already landed, and I really want to repeat because I think it's really important for all of us to take it, is that health really should not be seen any longer as a cost that needs to be minimized, but it really needs to be seen as a strategic national asset. And I think the pandemic and the COVID-19 really demonstrated in the best possible way, or the worst possible way, if you want, how economic growth and the healthcare are intrinsically linked. And this was the one of the reason and one of the triggers for us in AstraZeneca to actually reach out to the partners like London School of Economics and the World Economic Forum, and to see how we can bring together public and private sector and researchers and academia to look at the key barriers or the key pain points of the healthcare system today and how we can act upon those to make sure that healthcare system of the future will be more sustainable or more resilient in the case of any next possible crisis. And that's how the project that is called Partnership for Healthcare System Sustainability and Resilience actually started last year. And the project is really kind of bringing together the different important private and public stakeholders with the two key objectives that we set up front. And this is to build up the recommendations and then very practical and specific that are looking specifically in the early diagnostic, in the potential intervention of how to reduce hospitalization, in the way how to better optimize or improve chronic patient health, as well as how to use e-tools and the technology that is all around us to actually improve the quality of care that can positively impact both patients as well as healthcare expenditure. And with the second objective of the project was also to develop the blueprint for diseases that represent the major public health burden, and that we saw had a major impact during the negative impact during the COVID-19 crisis. And this is specifically lung cancer, chronic kidney disease, chronic airway disease, and the heart failure. And this is what the project delivered in the first year. We basically included 8 different countries, and that goes from the countries like UK, in Europe, and Vietnam, because we really wanted to test these recommendations in the different healthcare system across the globe. And we are very pleased to see that many other partners are now joining us, because the project got a very positive feedback all across. And we are happy to say that 13 more countries will be introduced into the project with the country research teams in the next stage that is basically starting as we speak. And I'm telling you this because I think it's really important to think about the overall objective that we have to make the healthcare system sustainable and resilient. But when we think about that, the value-based healthcare is absolutely critical part of it. And I personally don't think that the healthcare systems across the globe can be sustainable without making sure that we value healthcare in the right and transparent way, and we really encourage all the players within the system to value outputs, which means the impact of the overall healthcare burden and the impact of the patient outcome, instead of only valuing inputs, usually in the way of valuing volume or the cost per unit. And we spent quite a lot of time in AstraZeneca in the last few years, and probably even more during the COVID-19, to see what is the role we can play and how we can engage with the key stakeholders, specifically on the value-based healthcare. And based on the experience we have, I can say that there are basically 4 key enablers that we think are absolutely critical to make this transition of the healthcare system. The first is you need to have the mechanism or the organization, if you want, that is equipped to fairly assess the real value of the treatment or of any intervention within the healthcare. And by saying so, that means that you need to make sure that you identify the critical capabilities that are needed for that organization or the mechanism to do so. And I was actually quite interested to hear Reem talking about the transition in Saudi Arabia, because I know that our team in Saudi were also working together with the healthcare stakeholders, are specifically looking how you identify that on the example of the severe asthma, and how you really can take the critical KPI that will be your proxy or your measure of what is the good you are actually delivering to the patient. In this case specifically, it was a reduction of exacerbation for the severe asthma patient. And basically based on that, you're evaluating the real value as an output measure rather than input. And I think, having the data, having the real world evidence data and electronic records, which is the next step to look at, you can actually use that approach across all different therapy areas. That brings me to the second enabler of the value-based healthcare, and this is the word that was mentioned too many times today, and this is all about data. But when I say data here, I also want to emphasize that the data that enable value-based healthcare needs primarily to be trusted by all partners that will use it, and very well organized, so you actually can enable you to measure and track the patient outcome. And although it sounds complicated, when we look at the different countries and the availability of the data in the healthcare that already exists, my experience is also that it doesn't need to be extremely complex if we use the existing data pool in the smart and pragmatic way, if you want. And if you add the technology or the ability to organize and use those data with the different technology platforms we have now, that can definitely enable us to have that as a part of the base care. The third one would be the patient-centric solution, and I really believe that one of the critical enablers is to think about the value where we are delivering to the patients, rather than we only focus on the cost of the healthcare delivery. And I think thinking about the future and thinking that the majority of the medicines or innovative medicines in the future will have this precision component or digital therapeutics component that we heard earlier today, I do believe that this piece will become, or this enabler will become even more important moving forward. And I think it's clear, it's obvious to say that the task would be to make sure that all eligible patients, so all the patients that can value for the certain treatment or the medicine, should be entitled to get one. And we also know, all of us, that that's not necessarily the case. So therefore, how you make sure that we use the value-based contract to enable all eligible patients to have the access. And let me give you a short example where we are working with the government and key stakeholders in Estonia, where we are looking how to enable all the severe asthma patients that are eligible for the medicine, for the biologic medicine, to get that access, even if this is not included in the initial reimbursement criteria. And this is again similar to the examples I mentioned with the Saudi Arabia, is basically how you make sure that you measure those who benefited from the medicine, and basically they are the ones who are included in the contract, on the contrary to the ones that where the medicine or intervention didn't provide enough value. And that brings me to the last enabler of the value-based healthcare, which is a policies framework, or the political will at the end of the day. And I think we would all agree that framework is absolutely critical to really allow us to have the ability to do the contracts, have the mechanism to deliver on the value-based contracts through the data capture, which then allows us to really measure the value. And I'm happy to share the example on this one where we are working with the Italian government and the relevant stakeholders in Italy, that includes government and academia and scientific society, to really precisely measure the value of the specific medicine across the entire patient pathway. And currently we are able to do that because we have the capability to really combine the indirect or so-called administrative costs, like the hospital costs, with the clinical data, and combine those for a specific chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, heart failure, and chronic kidney disease. And if we manage to do that, that will definitely allow us to expand further on in the different diseases. And let me finish by saying that underpin all these enablers and all the experience we have lately really speaks strongly that only through the strong private-public partnership and political will, we as a stakeholders in the life science sector can actually move the needle, and through the open dialogue between the trusted parties, we can, and I'm sure we are able to make a change and transform healthcare delivery towards the one that will be value-based for the benefits of both patients as well as healthcare system around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Skra. We're clearly, we have convergence not just in science, but also on our views of what needs to be done. So I'll move swiftly to Rob to share some of the experiences of implementing value-based healthcare on the ground. Rob, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Artoon, and it's a real pleasure to be on this panel led by Dr. Al-Bunyan. It's anyway a great honor to be speaking to this distinct audience. Everything has almost been said about value-based healthcare, so I'm not going to try to repeat a lot of things that were mentioned. I think there is a huge opportunity for industry, institutions, politicians, policymakers to work together and come to an innovative way of healthcare delivery, and specifically the payment structures around that. And I've been part of many forums like this in the World Economic Forum. We are engaged in ICHOM, which is a very important initiative to try and measure these kind of things, and in all kinds of government meetings. But we at Medtronic, we felt that, at the end of the day, we can talk about these things a lot. Let's just try and see how they work. Let's see if we can find pockets of opportunity where we can display that collaboration and those models are actually delivering the true value, instead of just making value-based healthcare the acronym of the age of the century and not really being able to operationalize it. So we did a couple of things. We built a very strong consulting service organization that could help healthcare providers to start looking at healthcare delivery differently. We also decided to acquire a diabetes management, type 1 management company, clinic, and an obesity management clinic. Both chronic diseases that are difficult to manage, that cost a lot of money to society, and where we felt that with the right approach, and these people had developed those approaches, we could actually scale it and show that if you scale, you can continue to deliver these kind of outcomes. And with that, also financial advantages to the system. So we got our toes in the water on value-based healthcare and started to truly operationalize it. And let me give a few examples of how that worked. One, with providers. We've been intensely working together with hospital providers to optimize clinical care pathways around certain diseases and deeply understand why certain steps were taken and whether every step was really necessary along the way. And it was a very, and still is a very intriguing route where we see that the structure and process in healthcare is still very scattered, and everybody does, in very good intentions, the best they can, but there's not a lot of structure behind it in why one step follows the other step follows the other step. And the moment you build structure around that, you're going to find out that you can start to measure outcomes better. You find out that you measure cost better, and you find out that you become predictable on outcome in certain cohorts of patients. And now you're really starting to get to a model where you can go to a payer and say, let's do an open book calculation on this. These cohorts are bringing these kind of outcomes if you treat them like this. And the cost of that is X. And we're now starting to get those tractions with payers that are willing to go at risk with us, where we go also as a company together with the provider at risk in treating patients according to self-learning algorithms, where we have longitudinal data of patients that feed continuous information into the system to improve outcome and drive down the cost. Diabetes is another wonderful example, which we started in the Netherlands. And in my interactions with the MOH in the Kingdom, it's been fantastic that we had the chance to work together with the innovation hub in the Kingdom and the whole basically innovation that's going on in Saudi Arabia around healthcare, to be in one of the clusters, one of the healthcare clusters, and set up a diabetes clinic inside that cluster. And I'm really happy to say that the results of that cluster in Saudi Arabia are actually better than the results we saw in Holland up till now. In Holland, on average, these kids, type 1 diabetic kids, had a hospitalization level of about 10% per year. We brought it down in Holland to 1.5% per year. The cluster in Saudi Arabia brought it down to 1%. So that is clear examples of cost savings if you manage patients with data-enabled systems in a different way than through the general practitioner who, beyond all his or her other work, needs to also take care of a type 1 patient and obviously cannot provide the same level of dedicated care. So it's a wonderful example that these kind of models are scalable, that you can bring them into other markets. We're now bringing diabetes also into Spain. We're bringing diabetes into Italy. So there is many more places that have an interest in using these IT-enabled patient management systems. And the PRAMs and the prompts, as we call them nowadays, are extremely good. The patient experience, a very important part of patients' well-being, are very high, but also the outcomes are doing really well. Now, if you think about another acquisition that we did as Medtronic, which is called Neutrino, which is an AI tool that can help diabetic patients to better measure and manage their food intake. If you all digitalize that into that diabetes model, we truly help these patients live a much, much better life. There is immediate savings within the year, but we all know that if you don't go through hypers and hypos, the long-term effect on the neurovascular system is going to be really, really important to these patients. And so also the healthcare costs going down the road. With obesity management, we're doing exactly the same, using IT to be able to do appropriate patient selection and then have a very personalized journey for these patients to make sure that through an operation with pre and post care, they actually really end up on the weight that they deserve to have. And this model shows that about 85 to 90% of the patients after 5 years have all reached and stayed at their ideal weight. And ultimately, those kind of models where a company, providers, payers are in an open dialogue with each other and an open calculation will lead to value-based healthcare of the future. So yes, policy needs to change because it's hard work right now to fit it into the existing reimbursement models. And yes, we need to stop piloting and we need to start scaling. Really, really important. That's probably what I wanted to contribute to this discussion. And, obviously, if you want to have some more discussion, I'm more than happy to. But I don't want to repeat what already has been said. Thank you again for this opportunity. And I'm excited about where the world of healthcare and now how G20 and B20 will be helping us to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for sharing these very valuable experiences. Clearly, translating intention to action at the speed and scale, as Jeff Martha earlier said. So it's a great opportunity now to introduce the next panel, which is on digitalization. And this is something that all the earlier speakers talked about. Our first speaker is, the panelist is Jillian Hastings-Ward, who is the chair of the participant panel from Genomics England. Jillian, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. It's a real honour. It's been a fascinating discussion so far, and what I've been asked to contribute today is a patient perspective on the use of health data. So I've got a couple of slides that I'm just going to pull up as well. Let's see if I can do that. Good. Okay. Yes, I'm a patient, a research participant, and the carer of a severely disabled son. And all of these different hats bring me into contact with Genomics England, Health Data Research UK, and NHS Digital. So I've been able to gather those different experiences together to tell you today a bit about some patient and participant views on how health data is currently used and how we can see it developing in the future. First, I'd like to begin by saying that in this context, patients can really include anyone who might become sick at any point, not just those who've already got reason to see a healthcare professional. This therefore includes all of us, you and me and the rest of the population, just people. Health data about people is collected at national scales, and typically this happens without our explicit consent. In the UK, it's part of the unwritten social contract we have with the National Health Service in return for looking after us. But we still have some baseline expectations that our health data will be stored securely and used wisely for matters that relate to our healthcare. Research participants, on the other hand, have generally given their explicit consent to join a specific research programme. They may donate more detailed data for this, for example, whole exome or whole genome sequences, perhaps contribute additional questionnaire information about other aspects of their lives that might not be captured by our medical notes. They may expect to know more about how it's used, and they're naturally more likely to be supportive of its use more broadly in the research infrastructure. Indeed, they may expect their donated data to be shared widely and analysed deeply for medical research, and indeed be disappointed if it isn't. As we've all heard earlier, COVID has shown us the power of routinely collected health data. In the past 18 months, we've seen health data science pull together data from all over the world to help clinicians find answers for patients as fast as we possibly can. And that level of collaboration and cross-comparison has proved extremely useful. However, a lot of the data that is now collected about people's health relates to sensitive matters, and in the case of patients who have genetic or genomic sequencing, it is a whole genetic encyclopedia about each individual, This data can generate incredibly valuable insights, but it needs to be stored securely and used wisely. We know that patients and their families are often willing to share their data with trusted parties for the purposes of healthcare research, but they do expect them to look after it, and they do need to trust them. We might think of this as a typical patient experience. You give some blood, it's sent away somewhere far away where clever things happen to it with very clever people, but you have no contact with them directly. And then you get a result back in due course. This could be days, weeks, months, or in some cases even years later. And there's obviously a lot of gaps in patient understanding as to what's happening here. And so gaps in knowledge have to be filled with trust. We need to be able to trust that the people who've got our data are using it to the best of their intentions. But how do you generate and sustain this trust? Well, I would argue there's three elements to this that I want to talk about today. The first is secure foundations. The second is clear communication. And the third is meaningful involvement. So the first of these, secure foundations. In the United Kingdom, the idea that health data in research should be protected by 5 safes is gaining popularity. These are a set of principles which were developed in 2017 by the UK Data Service. They're designed to enable data custodians to provide safe research access to data and are supported by organisations such as Health Data Research UK, which brings together health data scientists who are interested in working with UK datasets. The UK Data Service says this framework has become best practice in data protection whilst fulfilling the demands of open science and transparency. Safe data ensures that data is treated to protect any confidentiality concerns. Typically, it's de-identified. Safe projects requires projects to be approved by data owners for the public good and potentially include public opinion in how those projects are approved. Safe people means that researchers have to be trained and authorised to use data safely. Safe settings means that data custodians are providing a secure environment which prevents unauthorised use of data. And safe outputs mean that data is screened and approved. Summary level data is able to come out from these trusted research environments, which is what we're calling the collection of this data. So from a patient and research participant perspective, knowing that data custodians are adhering to the 5 safes is very reassuring. It helps us to trust that our health data is being looked after properly, and it gives us a framework that we can refer to when encouraging other health data custodians to demonstrate that they're equally trustworthy. The second element I'd like to talk about is clear communication. Governments and other organisations have the ability to collect large volumes of health data at national scale, but they owe it to their populations to explain what they're doing. We need to know why this is necessary, why it is helpful, who will have access to it, who will benefit, and perhaps most importantly, what the data will not be used for. As we've seen recently in England, communication is essential if any large-scale health data collection programme is to succeed. We found that a plan to collect primary care health records from across England, which was announced earlier this year, without public buy-in, encountered such opposition that it's currently being revised to include the 5 safes and a much wider programme of public engagement. But we can do much better than telling people to look for the 5 safes. We can actively involve citizens in decisions about how their health data is used. Patients and their representatives can help set the principles, they can advise decision makers, and they can get directly involved in decisions about how that data is used. I've got 3 examples that I'd like to share with you. So the first one is direct influence. One of the ways that health data custodians can generate and maintain trustworthiness is to ensure that participants or their representatives have a voice within the organisation. Our participant panel at Genomics England is formed by about 25 people whose data are currently in the data bank there and is being looked at by the researchers who work with Genomics England on a variety of projects, focusing mostly at the moment on rare diseases, certain forms of cancer and COVID. We advise Genomics England about what matters to participants. Some of our panel sits on the Ethics Advisory Committee at Genomics England, and some of other members of the panel sit on the Access Review Committee, which decides directly which organisations can have access to this data and what they can do with it when they get there. This means that participant voices are directly informing what happens to our data. The next one I want to talk about is the advisory role that the independent group advising on the release of data, also known as IGARD, has at NHS Digital. NHS Digital is the national provider of information, data and IT systems for health and social care, and as part of this, it's responsible for collating our digital health records. NHS Digital receives hundreds of applications each year for access to this incredibly valuable health data, which includes personal information and de-identified data. It has a group of independent advisors who review such applications to make sure they're appropriate within the law and successfully mitigate any identified risks that may arise which could impact upon patient confidentiality. IGARD meets twice a week and includes patients, medics and lay public representatives. It's chaired by an independent member of the public and it reports directly to the board of NHS Digital. They say, we aim to improve transparency, accountability, quality and consistency through robust independent scrutiny of NHS Digital distributions. NHS Digital data distributions, as well as providing a voice for the public. And their role has come under increasing scrutiny this year with the increased focus that we've had in Britain about what our health data is being used for. The third example here I'd like to share briefly is One London. In 2018, several public bodies in London realised that it would be helpful to bring together the health data they hold for the benefits of patients and these organisations themselves who are responsible for looking after them. This included the London Ambulance Service, NHS England, 5 health and care partnerships and 3 academic health science networks. In spring 2020, just before COVID really hit us, One London hosted the world's largest public deliberation on the use of health and care data. 100 Londoners, selected to reflect the city's diverse population, met over several weekends in the form of a citizen summit. Together, they developed detailed recommendations which are now being shared and used to shape policy in health data use across London. A data sharing framework was drafted following the Citizen Summit, and the aims of consistently joining up our health data, making it accountable and making sure that it's safeguarded have fed directly into the framework which is now being implemented in practice. So why is all this important? Why does trust matter so much? It was wonderful to hear it being mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth unpacking slightly. We want our health data to inform new research.
If you could be wrapping up, that would be really wonderful.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I was told I had 10 minutes. I must have gone on too long. Okay, so it's really important because we need to make sure that the organisations who hold our data can be trusted, and that means that we'll be more willing to share more of it for more exciting purposes as we move forward. In summary, health data science has the potential to find more accurate diagnoses, better treatments, and deeper understanding of the causes and implications of disease than ever before. This is great news for patients, but we must make sure that it also keeps individuals safe and recognises that some people do not want to share their data in this way. We must remember that in health science, every data point is attached to a person, and we must treat each one of them with appropriate care. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian, for sharing your very valuable perspective and stressing the importance of safety, communication, and involvement to build trust. So we have 3 speakers, and I'd like to ask them if they could allocate 5 minutes to ensure that we're on time with the panel. So Miki Tripathi, who's the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology at US Department of Health and Human Services. Miki, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, and I will definitely take 5 minutes. So I'm delighted to be here. I am the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, which is a federal government agency reporting directly to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and we're responsible for coordination of federal government health IT activities, as well as coordination of health IT activities broadly across the country. I'll just cover a couple of things as it relates generally to our approach to digitization of healthcare information. As many of you may know, starting in 2010 exactly, actually, the U.S. embarked on what started as a health IT evolution and is now sort of turning into what we're hoping will be a health IT revolution. It began in 2010 with the beginning of what ended up becoming $40 billion in federal investments to provide incentives to providers across the country to invest in electronic health record systems. Those systems had to be certified by my office, the National Coordinator's Office. We certify electronic health record systems for functionality, for data standards, for a wide variety of things. And I'm pleased to report that, now after roughly now 11 years and over $40 billion of federal incentives, we now have an amazing foundation of electronic health records across the country. Over 95% of hospitals in the US and over 90% of ambulatory providers in the US are now on electronic health record systems that are certified by my office. That brings us to the opportunity, the huge opportunity to say, now that we've made that investment, which was a lot of resources, blood, sweat, and tears on the private and the public side, to say, what is it now that we want to accomplish with that foundation of electronic health records? And what we want to be able to accomplish is an open platform for exchange to enable patients and providers and other authorized parties to be able to use that information using the conventions that are very familiar in the rest of the internet, which is to say open industry standards, open industry platforms to allow the sharing of information for appropriate uses without the technology being a hindrance to that exchange of information. So there are a variety of angles that we're pursuing on that. One was the 21st Century Cures Act, which was passed and signed by President Obama in 2016, has a couple of different components into it that are very, very important. One is that it establishes the requirement for, and indeed the obligation for provider organizations, health information technology developers, and health information networks, as they're called, to share information with other authorized parties. And share clinical information with other authorized parties. So it kind of changes the paradigm, which in the US had been based on permission. There are certain laws that allowed them to share information, but it didn't require them to. 21st Century Cures Act makes the behavioral paradigm shift that says that you are obligated to share that information according to a set of policies defined by the National Coordinator's Office, ONC, which we promulgated last year and which went into effect this year on April 5th. So that's a huge motivation now for the industry to now say that they have to share information with other parties, including patients. In addition, to couple that behavioral motivation that's now a matter of law, we also put in place requirements for the enablement of particular standards for open industry APIs that allow the access of information, as the law said, without special effort was the exact term that was used in the law. And those are FHIR standards that we have published and that all vendors are required to support by the end of 2022. So just by the end of next calendar year, they're all required to support it. Many vendors have already proceeded to implement those open API capabilities as well. And what we want then is for an ecosystem that, again, is more of a platform business and technical model. It allows apps, substitutable apps, to be available across EHR platforms, for example, and opens up the opportunities for the ability of people to be able to use APIs in the ways that we use them in every other part of the internet, to be able to use them for focused use cases related to patient-facing and patient control kinds of applications, as well as B2B kinds of exchanges, provider to provider, provider to public health, provider to research, a wide variety of use cases there. ONC just did a survey of the EHR vendors, and we documented over 900 apps that are now available across those EHR systems according to both proprietary as well as open industry standards. We anticipate that the balance of that will shift to APIs that are available as open industry standards, namely the FHIR R4 standard, as the rule kicks in, as I said, by the end of 2022. The other thing, two things I'll quickly point to are, we are also, according to the 21st Century Cures Act, required to create a governance structure for network-to-network interoperability across the country. I think of this as being a floor of interoperability to assure that everyone in the country, regardless of where they live geographically, regardless of where they are in the healthcare continuum, have access to a basic package of clinical information that's defined by our office, that's known as the U.S. Core Data for Interoperability. It's essentially the minimum data set for the healthcare industry. That is going to be going live in the first quarter of 2022, that nationwide network capability that connects up the networks that exist today. And then last thing I'm going to point to, and then I will, we'll look forward to the presentation for the next speaker, is health equity is a very, very important part of what we're doing in this administration and what my office is doing. We have a concept that we're developing called health equity by design, which many of you may be familiar with, following the paradigm of software development, workflow, process development, of safety by design, privacy by design, security by design. We believe that health equity should be a core design principle in health IT systems and implementations going forward. So we've done a number of things to enable that. One is that we have included in that minimum data set that I described before. We've included social determinants of health, as well as sexual orientation and gender identity data elements to be part of the guidelines that then will turn into requirements to be exchanged as a part of that core data set. We're also doing a number of innovation types of activities to try to broaden our concept of interoperability to be able to have social determinants of health considerations, as well as other considerations, be a part of the core interoperability structures that we build in, so that we can have capabilities like being able to order, as one would order an imaging or order a lab result, be able to order housing assistance, for example, to be able to order food assistance, for example, out of an electronic health record system using the same conventions that we're using for interoperability today. So I know that was a very broad and fast sweep, but hopefully that gives you some sense of what we're doing here in the US, and very much look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey, for sharing these remarkable achievements. So I'll swiftly move over to Andrew Morris, who's Director of Health Data Research in the UK. Andrew.
Thank you, Rifat. Greetings from Scotland. As you can see, it's a bit chilly here. I've got 4 layers on. Two ambitions today. Firstly, I'm going to be quicker than Mickey to get through time. And secondly, I'm going to try and build on what Jillian and Mickey have said and try and convince you that it's time we had a fresh look at building and maintaining the integrity of a trustworthy global health data research ecosystem for research and innovation. And it's the plumbing that matters. So I'm Director of Health Data Research UK, which is the National Institute for Health Data Science. Our ambition is to unite the entirety of the UK's health data to enable discoveries that improves people's lives, to run studies on up to 66 million people. COVID has transformed the way we've used not only health data, but cross-sectoral data. So we were fortunate to be invited by the UK government to map, to flow, to link in the public interest, multidimensional data across government, academia, the health service and industry to enable questions to be answered relevant to the pandemic response. So the mapping and the integration of data has allowed us to flow vaccination data for the entire population, viral sequence data, antigen data, variant of concern data, then link that to general practitioner data and hospitalization data. And with that real-time intelligence, one can ask really important questions that has influenced pandemic response internationally. The impact of single-dose vaccination, the mortality of the Delta variant, recruitment and ascertainment of outcomes to the recovery trial have all been enabled through a comprehensive, integrated, linked data system on 66 million people. But what we've also seen during COVID is that one nation's data is not enough. We need to, in a trustworthy way, share data internationally. This is hard, but it's a big prize. And we need to do this not only for the preparation for the next pandemic, but to address non-COVID related harm, whether that's cancer, coronary vascular disease, respiratory disease. And we're in the foothills of where we need to be. In COVID, there are 2,908 clinical trials internationally. The amount of data sharing across those trials has been woeful. Most trials are underpowered. Why have we not harnessed our collective effort? It's because we do not have robust governance and data infrastructure to enable data sharing on an international scale. So I would argue that the fancy analytics is the easy bit. Where we need to focus attention is on the standardization, the governance, the annotation, the authorization and authentication of researchers, and demonstrating trustworthiness and public engagement, as Jillian has so eloquently said. This stuff is hard, but everyone seems to think it's someone else's problem to solve. So why don't we collectively work together to develop this trustworthy data ecosystem? Finally, I've been privileged with the support of the Gates Foundation and Minderoo to convene an international alliance, which is taking the 5 safes principle on COVID data to say, can we link COVID data internationally? With a driver project approach, we have in one project working with the IPOP consortium, looked at the impact of COVID-19 on perinatal morbidity and mortality. This has brought 159 collaborators together across 41 countries, including 21 low-middle income countries, sharing data around a common purpose. So I will conclude, Rifat, to summarize, we urgently need, as I urgently speak very quickly, to not only look at the analytics, but the governance infrastructure, the trustworthiness, and the technology infrastructure, as Mickey has outlined, to enable a trustworthy global network of collaborative data science and innovation. And I would commend the 5 safes approach to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for keeping to time as well and for the excellent summary. So Jason Oxman, who is President and CEO of Information Technology at the Industry Council. Last comment from this panel, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Professor, and it's still a real delight to be with all of you today. As the Global Trade Association of the technology industry, ITI is very focused on representing the world's most innovative companies in technology policy discussions. The G20 is really an ideal forum for us to talk about the public policies that can advance and support the simple fact that the healthcare industry is the technology industry. We've been very focused on policy recommendations to the G20 nations that help advance the access that all citizens in the world need to healthcare. Nothing more important than healthcare technology, and the COVID-19 pandemic is certainly a great example of the advances that technology can make possible in healthcare around the world. So we focused on very concrete policy recommendations that the G20 can take up to leverage the digital transformation in healthcare that you heard so eloquently about from Jeff and Rob from Medtronic in particular, to help further economic recovery and resilience. 3 specific and very concrete policy proposals that we focused on to help healthcare technology innovations improve lives around the world. Those 3 policy recommendations are encouraging data flows, universal compatible privacy regulation, and interoperable approaches to artificial intelligence. Let me talk briefly about each of those. First, encouraging data flows. Digital ecosystems, which really drive today's global commerce and healthcare in particular, depend on the flow of data. And so that's why we focused on the recommendation that ensure data flows seamlessly across borders. So policies that advance the free flow of data, recognize the need for interoperability across borders, and avoid imposing damaging data localization requirements. So we want to make sure that G20 nations all avoid digital protectionism or imposing barriers to digital trade, specifically in recovery planning and economic stimulus packages that they're all considering. So we ask leaders to really respect international agreements, to ensure that there are no barriers to digital trade, and encouraging non-discriminatory regulatory approaches that impact digital services and technologies and infrastructure. Many have heard about the focus on the EU and US negotiations on a replacement for Privacy Shield. That's important to ensure transatlantic data flows, but more broadly, the G20 nations need to focus on this. Second, privacy regimes. Privacy, maintaining trust among individuals, protecting data and personal information is paramount for the success of healthcare technology. So the technology industry is very focused on empowering consumers increasingly to own and understand their own data, including, of course, medical and health data, and feeling confident that the protection of their data, their profiles, their accounts, especially when it comes to healthcare, is paramount in the minds of policymakers and individuals and companies. So we've encouraged the G20 to focus on the data free flow with trust principles while encouraging a high level of privacy. Our industry, the technology industry, continues to call for adoption of unified rules around the world. GDPR is the leading example in Europe. The United States does not currently have a federal privacy law, but needs one. So we want to make sure that from the engineering to the design to the product phases, the technology industry focuses on privacy. Third, and finally, we need an interoperable approach to artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence plays an incredibly strong and transformative role in healthcare, and the need for harmonized governance of AI has never been stronger. So our advocacy to the G20 on this issue, we've called for a common risk-based approach to the regulation of emerging technologies like AI to ensure that applications can be leveraged and that they can benefit healthcare innovation. ITI has published the global AI policy recommendations for the use of policymakers. We believe that in addition to global engagement on AI policy and aligned approaches to governing technology, our recommendations should also encourage policymakers to focus on increasing innovation and investment in AI. We also want to focus on workforce development and research and development in AI. We want to facilitate public trust and understanding to promote meaningful AI deployment and ethical design approaches. And finally, we think that regulation of AI must respond to specific harms, not generalized ideas, while allowing for advancements in technology and innovation. We think that the security and privacy of AI systems is vitally important to increased healthcare technology innovation. So as we look ahead to the G20 summit this year in October, it's really crucial, we believe, to underscore the central role that digitization plays in healthcare technology. We are urging G20 leaders to prioritize consistent and effective leadership on global trade and digital governance issues. We at ITI, as the Global Trade Association of the technology industry, look forward to further participations through the B20 and the G20 to make sure that these policy issues are at the forefront as we look to move forward healthcare technology internationally. And with that, thanks very much for the opportunity to be today.
Thank you, Jason. I'll swiftly hand over to Sir Mark Caulfield, who is Chief Executive of Barts Life Sciences, to provide some final closing remarks, followed by Minister Sadikian. And at the end, we're going to have a short video from B20 Health and Science Task Force. Over to you, Sir Mark.
Rifat, I'll be very brief. Minister Speranza, congratulations on the Italian presidency. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Dompe, my fellow co-chairs, and thank all of you for joining today. We have three simple messages. If we develop and monitor national plans to support uptake of technologies and the strategic use of science and technology and data applied to good effect, and alongside that, we assess and measure health as an investment and transition to value-based healthcare, and combine that with the opportunity to build resilient and sustainable systems, we will usher in a new era of preventive healthcare. And if we've learned anything in the last 18 months, we cannot go back to the way it was. We've learned how to use data imaginatively. The future of healthcare is multimodal combinations of data at scale, and we must usher in an adaptive regulatory framework to assure that. And Minister Sadikian, as I hope we hand through Minister Speranza the baton of the Health and Life Sciences Task Force to you, that you will continue to build on these recommendations, because the job will not be done in 1 year, but it will take several years to achieve these. And we hope this framework is helpful to you during the Indonesian presidency. On behalf of Mr. Dompe, my co-chairs, myself, thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for the excellent summary and very clear recommendations. So I'll hand over to Minister Sadikian.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to extend my gratitude to the organizing committee for granting me the honor to deliver some closing remarks at the B20-G20 Dialogue, titled Reshaping Global Health Towards Implementations. I'm pleased to note that this important event has been devoted to addressing a number of relevant health issues, particularly at a time when we are still engaged in our collective response to bring the COVID-19 pandemic to an end. Perseverance is the key. As a global community, we must refuse to surrender during this challenging time. Instead, we have to work hand in hand and make sure that no one is left behind in the fight against the pandemic or any other global health emergencies. We have been through many different phases of the COVID-19 pandemic and utilizing various countermeasures since almost 2 years ago. There have been a significant number of lessons learned that we can tap into our effort to ensure that our health systems can be better prepared in dealing with future health public emergencies. Through B20 and G20 dialogue, we have learned that we have to work together to achieve a more resilient, responsive, and adaptive health systems. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as set out by the Health and Life Science Task Force in its policy paper, we have 3 primary recommendations that we need to implement. First, promote the strategic use of science, technology, and data. Second, assess and measure health as an investment and foster the transition to value-based healthcare. And third, build resilient and sustainable health systems. We completely support these recommendations as they could serve as the cornerstone in our global effort, especially to achieve more resilient health systems. Furthermore, there are recommendations to a great extent reflected strongly in our current health development agenda and also in our priority health issues to be brought up and discussed during our presidency of G20. We put the strategic use of science, technology, and data high on our health development agenda, as we believe that these elements play a critical role in creating a more resilient and responsive healthcare system. However, we are also aware that there are some challenges in utilizing science, technology, and data to their full potential, most notably those related to legal framework. Therefore, in this context, G20 members could focus on removing existing national legal framework hurdles and set clear guidance on data sharing. The action is critical to improve diagnosis, treatment, and care coordination between all actors in health ecosystems. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over the past few years, we have been grappling with the issue of how can we use our health resources, both human and financial, more effectively in achieving our goals in healthcare services. And we have also witnessed a growing momentum in many countries across the world to put an end to the unnecessary waste of health resources. Judging from this situation, it is a critical time that we have shifted away from our traditional healthcare delivery, which still put an enormous emphasis on fee-for-volume services to fee-for-value services. We realize that this is no easy task for us all, and there is a long way to go before we can reach what we are aiming for. For one thing, defining what constitutes value could generate a lot of discussions among all the relevant stakeholders. Therefore, in the light of its critical role, G20 should foster the transition to value-based healthcare by defining, implementing, monitoring, and rewarding quality of care standards and patient care pathways through metrics which take into account a broader societal perspective. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light the loopholes in our health systems that may have remained unforeseen. These public health emergencies have proved that our health systems are still ill-prepared to deal with public health crises of pandemic scale. For this very reason, G20 must build on the lessons learned from the global response to the pandemic in order to attain a more resilient global health architecture. First, a global protocol for public health, social, and infection control measures must be developed. This aims at ensuring safe and standardized cross-border interconnectivity, be it according to one's vaccination status, testing result, or health status in general. Second, we also need global policy and instrument on pooling of resources that can be rapidly disbursed to countries in need. Shall there be another emerging health crisis in the future? Third, we must aggressively develop locally based manufacturing capacities for vaccine, therapeutics, and diagnostic, especially in developing countries. To do this, transfer of technology and know-how, as well as improving capacity in research and development, should be accelerated. Excellencies, as a way forward, we need to achieve our shared goals in ensuring more resilient health system and global health architecture through bilateral and multilateral cooperations. To conclude, as a global nation, we should see the pandemic beyond a threat, but as an opportunity to build a much stronger healthcare systems, resiliency, and innovations. We need to make sure now and then that health is an investment, not a cost. This should serve as our point of departure and foundation of all our endeavors going forward. Thank you for your continued support for our G20 presidency next year, and looking forward to any collaborative effort that may help us achieve our common goals in global health. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate the really excellent comments by Minister Budikin. So much enthusiasm that this meeting has generated. And I'd like to, before the final video, I'd like to thank the co-chairs of B20, Health and Science Task Force, and to all the speakers and panelists for very rich and very energizing presentations and discussions. Thank you all and have a wonderful time. So over to you, Sergio, for the final video.
Science opens the world to us. Science and research enable us to be born, to grow, to love, to live in dignity. A research that walks with us, runs with us, shouts with us. It drives economies, culture, and history. Based on science at the service of the people, it makes everything we do possible. A research that is new each time. It leads us to new discoveries, and it turns them into our normal life. We call them life sciences, and today, more than ever, they unleash innovation. Research shapes our global future, and it is in our hands. Investing in research and innovation means investing in our health for today and tomorrow.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you to everyone, and wonderful job, Rifat. Thank you so much, and thank you to the Minister for the closing.
Thank you.
To everyone. Thank you, Werner. Bye to everyone.
Thank you.